The Tale of the Three Trees, a traditional folk tale. Once upon a mountain top, three little trees stood, and they dreamed about what they wanted to become when they grew up. The first little tree looked up at the stars twinkling like diamonds above him, and he said, "I want to hold treasure. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I want to be the most beautiful treasure chest in the whole world." The second little tree looked out at the stream as it trickled by on its way out to the ocean, and he said, "I want to be a strong sailing ship. I want to sail mighty waters, and I want to carry powerful kings. I want to be the strongest ship in the world." The third little tree looked down into the valley below, and she could see busy men and busy women all working in a busy town. And she said, "I don't want to leave the mountain top at all. I want to grow tall so that when people look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I want to be the tallest tree in the world." Years passed. The rains came, the sun shone, and the three little trees grew tall. Then one day, three woodcutters climbed the mountain top. The first woodcutter looked up at the first tree, and he said, "This tree is beautiful. It is perfect for me." And with a swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. "Now I shall be made into a chest and be filled with treasure," thought the first tree. The second woodcutter looked up at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It is perfect for me." And with a swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. "Now I shall be made into a ship fit for kings." The third tree felt her heart sink when the woodcutter looked her way. She stood straight and tall and bravely pointed toward heaven. But the woodcutter never even looked up. "Oh, any old tree'll do," he muttered, and with a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop, but the busy carpenter wasn't thinking about treasure chest. Instead, he took his work-worn hands and he fashioned the tree into a feeding box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold and filled with treasure, but instead it was covered with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter brought him to a shipyard. But no great sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a little fishing boat. Too small and too weak to sail the ocean or even a river, he was taken to a little lake. Every day, he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her on a woodpile in a lumber yard. "What happened?" thought the tall tree. "All I wanted to do was stay on the mountain top and point to God." Many, many days and nights passed, and the three little trees nearly forgot their dreams. Then one night, golden starlight poured over the first little tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby into the box. "I wish I could make a cradle for him," whispered her husband. She squeezed his hand and smiled as the golden starlight shone on the soft and sturdy wood. "Oh, but this manger is beautiful." And then the first little tree knew that he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One night, a very tired traveler and his friends crowded onto the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the boat sailed quietly out onto the lake. Then a thundering and thrashing storm began, and the little boat shuddered, for he knew he was not strong enough to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and the rain. And the traveler, he awakened, and he stood up, and he raised his hands, and he said, "Peace!" And the storm stopped as quickly as it had started. And then the second tree realized that he was carrying the King of all heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked off the forgotten woodpile. She flinched when she was carried through an angry and jeering crowd, and she shuddered when the soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt so ugly and so harsh and so cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth shook with joy beneath her, she knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful, and it had made the second tree strong. And whenever anyone thought of the third tree, they would think of God. And that was better than being the tallest tree.